Hi there, I'm Beth Ramsden, and I was delighted to be invited by my friends at Enchantarium to join their inaugural BALLGOWN SEWDOWN collaboration. Joining Enchantarium and myself are My Lady Disdain, Magical Girl Kit Kat, Threads of Elysium, Puppy 52, Dollypath, Smart Doll Boutique UK, Joe Sews, Sky Pie Dolls, O Costuero, and Octo Pudding. And even Danny Chu is joining in with their latest Smart Doll cosplay. You'll find everyone's YouTube channel or Instagram linked in my description box below, so please be sure to check them all out after watching my video. The premise of this collab is all about bringing the doll making community together for a fun and creative challenge. It's more of a celebration than a competition, and if it's a hit, Enchantarium hopes to make it an annual tradition, like the Met Gala, with a new theme every year. Although the title is BALLGOWN SEWDOWN, we're not all expected to make big poofy dresses, although I know some of them will be. Instead, the goal is to create any fancy, elegant outfit that fits the theme. The theme this year is Princess. We were each asked to declare our chosen princess to avoid any duplicates, and to create either just an outfit or a fully custom doll in 1/3 scale. I've chosen to make mine using a smart doll. I immediately thought of a handful of princesses that I would like to design, but I narrowed it down to one that perhaps seems obvious for me to choose: the Scottish princess Merida from the film Brave. Fortunately, I already have a beautiful wig that will suit her, with her long, curly ginger hair. And after looking through my box of unpainted smart doll heads, I chose this resin printed head that my husband altered from the free 3D file that Danny had shared of the pear anime sculpt. Danny was originally unhappy with how the mouth looked on their own version and had invited creators to make alterations to it. I think the anime aesthetic and the wider shape of the pear sculpt will really suit my Merida. Having made these decisions, my next question was, which fabrics did I have in my stash that could be suitable for this project? Whenever possible, I try to use what I already have before shopping for new fabrics. I looked out a few different cotton and polyester, lightweight and sheer fabrics. I think the colour and weight of the lowest fabric here will be perfect for her main dress colour. And I think the pop of bright yellow will be the perfect contrast using one of these cotton fabrics too. I find having specific fabrics in mind before I start my concept sketches really helps inform the way I plan out my designs. I drew what is essentially Merida's dress from the film first of all, before coming up with some original designs. I decided to go ahead with this design and sketched out a few more detailed plans with notes to myself about the construction. You can see from my concept sketch that I'm planning to use a classic smart doll body, but it just so happened that Danny had released the first batch of the fully soft Sofubi peach bodies around this time. I purchased one in cinnamon and filmed an unboxing and review video that I'll summarise briefly here, but will release in full for my followers on Patreon if you're curious to hear all my opinions in the moment. The body comes partially disassembled, doesn't include a head, but does include a clickety-click stand. Every part of the body is produced using the softer grade Sofubi vinyl, and as such enables the Evolve frame inside to reach further extremes of posability. I bent and braced the upper leg in my hand before aligning the peg of the knee with the whole of the skeleton inside the thigh and push firmly to connect. The rest of the assembly is fairly straightforward, sliding the bust on top and pushing in each arm. With the hands connected, the body is ready for a head. Having used this body much more at this point, I can tell that it won't be for everyone, but I certainly appreciate the extended range of movement. In particular, I like the way the arms are able to cross further across the front of the bust and also behind the back too. The ability to raise the legs high is the biggest bonus for me personally, letting the doll sit on a flat surface more naturally. I confess I had hoped the range of motion in the knee might be a little more pronounced. I'll include a few photos of the fully soft body compared to a Gen 2 body at the end. But in my opinion, the range of motion of the fully soft body is similar enough to the first Peach body that had only the soft lower torso that I don't feel it would be worth replacing the first Peach body with a fully soft body if you already had one, because I feel the biggest difference in articulation comes through the lower torso and its ability to let the legs lift further up. For this collaboration, I decided to make use of the silicone Attica bust to further enhance the proportions of my princess. I've actually not patterned anything for such a large bust yet, so this might be a little challenging. A little spoiler from the future here, where I've already colour matched the head. Well, I've made my decisions and chosen the two fabrics I'll be working with. So next I need to get on with the patterning process. Working with different proportions than usual meant I couldn't use my usual dress form to design the corset. The Peach body has a larger bum than the standard classic girl, and the Attica bust is larger too. To save time, I decided to wrap the upper and lower torso tightly in cling film. Then I would use my very narrow black tape to stick directly to the cling film in the places I wanted my seam lines to be. I only needed to mark out half of the body since the pattern will be flipped symmetrically. I marked out the top and bottom of the corset as well, and then grabbed some lightweight cotton fabric to trace my seam lines onto. Since I couldn't stick pins in the doll itself, I instead had to carefully hold the fabric as I traced each seam. I drew right down the middle of each black line and added a centre line round the waist that I could use to add markers on each pattern piece to help align them back together afterwards. I neaten up my lines and add a 1/4 inch seam allowance around each piece before cutting them out to make a tiny test of my pattern. I was really happy with how it worked out and was then able to cut out a paper pattern to work from. To stabilise my fabric, I first cut out my templates on a medium weight iron-on interfacing. I placed my interfacing pieces on my fabric and ironed them on before cutting out and assembling. I don't intend to release this pattern since it uses quite non-standard parts. However, if there's enough demand for it, I will share it on Patreon. Here I've joined all my pieces and have left the top part of the centre bust open to match my concept art. I've turned and top stitched each of my seams as well. Next, I'm going to create some boning channels in my yellow fabric to highlight the seam lines, and will use standard plastic cable ties, cut to length, as my boning. I cut each piece to length and initially measured my fabric at twice the width of the boning to wrap around the sides, but found it wasn't wide enough and changed it to 3 times the width of the boning instead. I would whip stitch the fabric around the boning first and then hand stitch it using an invisible stitch directly onto the corset. I left a little excess fabric at the top and bottom to allow for tidying the edges later. This whole hand sewing process took quite a long time, and at some point the cat decided to come and supervise me, trying to sample my materials for quality control.
Thank you, so helpful. Yes. Yes, yes, very helpful. Wow, so helpful. Yeah. Oh no, 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 no thread for you. No. Hi. No, don't eat it. No, no, no. Please, no. Wobble, wobble. All right, what do we think? I'm worried it's too much. Are you gonna lie down? Decisions to be made on how this will work. I don't know.
I stitched everything except the 2 center front pieces, and initially couldn't decide between these 2 options for placement. I decided this version looked best, then turned and started hand stitching the top, bottom and back hems. Here I'm very slightly skimming the surface of the interfacing layer in order to create a fully invisible stitch from the outside. I also cut pattern pieces in white cotton to form a lining layer, which I'll show a little later. I wanted to start making the skirt next, so I could see exactly where the opening for the stand port needs to be for the corset as well. I began by taking measurements of my doll and used a tape measure to try to work out the lower hem measurements too. I sketched out what I thought my panel pieces needed to look like and started making calculations based on the measurements I'd taken to work out their dimensions. I did this by drawing these oval shapes, divided into 5 to represent my panels, and then divided the waist, hip, knee and lower hem measurements to plot out against each section. Here's a look at all the measurements I ended up plotting out. Who would have thought a calculator would be such an essential sewing tool? Using these measurements, I put together my paper templates, drawn on A3 paper with pieces patched on where needed. I've designed the skirt with a V-shape open section at the top back to leave space for the stand, and a little sticking out section for me to have an overlapped closure too. I use a rotary cutter to cut out all my pattern pieces. I find it much quicker for large pieces like this. I join everything at the sewing machine before test fitting and had a little incident when pressing my seams, melting the fabric with a hot iron. After recutting and sewing those panels, I had a successful test fit, although I forgot to leave open the split in the front of the skirt here. Since I enjoy jumping around from piece to piece without finishing anything, let's make a start on the sleeves. I decided it made sense to use the existing free pattern of the Beer Girl dress as a starting point for my similarly shaped princess sleeves. The wonderful Beer Girl dress was designed by Chun at Puppy52 Dolls. The alterations I made were to extend the height of the upper sleeve puff and to extend the length of the tight sleeve, doing away with the lower frill. I give the cuff of the sleeve a slight point as well. I cut out my pattern pieces, layering teal over yellow temporarily for the upper puff pieces. I mark some vertical lines where I plan to stitch and cut to help me create neat stripes. I will stitch along the lines that have pins and cut along the other lines, and will then fold in the edges before top stitching them down. I forgot to get footage of the stripes before I gathered them up, so hopefully you can imagine what I did. The sleeves were assembled in the same way as in my Beer Girl dress tutorial video, and can now be turned and test fitted. I'm really pleased with how everything is looking so far, and I hope you can see those stripes clearly on the sleeves. I overlocked and pressed the seams on the sleeves before moving back to finishing off the corset and skirt. The lining of my corset will be hand stitched in place and will have a panel added to the back, purposefully shortened to leave space for the stand port. I'll also be attaching metal eyelets to both edges of the closure. The lining is stitched in place and encloses the little yellow piece of fabric that is peeking through the centre front slit. I measure the distances for my eyelets and use a hole punch and a crocodile tool to set them in. I stitched the panel in place and added narrow yellow ribbon for the closure. I decided to place the lacing like I would for a real corset, with loops in the middle for tying. With the corset finished, I moved over to the skirt and hand stitch on some hooks and hand knotted loops for the back closure. I then tried to decide how I would like to finish off the lower hem of the skirt, which is around 90 centimetres in total. I think using the same narrow ribbon as the corset would be nice, but I also wanted to include an embroidered element. I test out a few potential options in yellow thread and choose my favourite to stitch on. While I still debate about the final touches on the skirt, I decide to make a start on the face-up. I use simple acrylic paints to mix a matching skin tone for the cinnamon body, then spend nearly a whole day painting and drying many thin layers for a smooth finish. I didn't have a solid plan for the face-up itself, just one rough sketch to get me started. With a base coat of matte sealant in place and a pair of turquoise Smart Doll eyes borrowed from my Ellie, I make a start on lightly penciling in her eye outline shapes. I have the wig on to help me determine the height of her eyebrows as I finish drawing the first layer of colouring. I build up deeper colours through subsequent layers of matte sealant and watercolour pencils. I draw in a scattering of freckles and purposefully give her a slight asymmetric smirk to match the sassy character of her movie counterpart. Through further layers, I sketch eyelashes and highlights and refine the look of the open mouth, which is a first for me. Once I'm satisfied with the face-up, I seal it with 3 more layers of sealant and add a little gloss varnish to her lips. Finally, I returned to the skirt and made my final decision on the lower hem decoration. The embroidery by itself isn't enough, and ultimately I decided that 2 rows of the narrow yellow ribbon highlight the detail perfectly. I carefully stick these onto place with fabric glue, and with this finishing touch, her outfit is complete. I decide to include some fine white stockings and black high heels, both of which I purchased from AliExpress. I'm then able to put everything together for the first time and see her fully completed. What do you think of my smart doll Merida? Please feel free to leave me a comment below. I'd love to know what you liked about her and if you've seen the film Brave. Let me say thank you to Barb and Alex at Enchantarium for inviting me to join in this tremendously fun collaboration. I'm really looking forward to seeing the creations shared by all the other talented members in our group. Please be sure to leave everyone a like on their video or Instagram post and a lovely comment to show your appreciation for all their hard work. We all managed to put these projects together in a relatively short time span, and it was wonderful to see everyone band together and cheer each other on in our Discord group, where we each shared our setbacks and our progress. Let me also thank my kind supporters over on Patreon, including our newest additions, Ingeborg Vincents and Gillian Brown. Thank you all so much for joining me there, and patrons, let me know if you want that corset pattern. Thank you all for watching. I really hope you enjoyed today's collaboration video, and will go check out the other princesses being shared today. Please take care of yourselves and look out for each other, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.